Thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. This week, this is the second episode that's going to air this week. This is a special report episode with my friend Nick Cole, and I really wanted to do this special show because Nick has a new book out that he just snuck out into the world, and it's something a little different for Nick. I've been reading an art copy that he sent me last week, and it's phenomenal. It's just brain melting and also heart wrenching, all at the same time. And I just wanted to get Nick to come on and talk about it and to give us a little bit of the story behind the story. Welcome, Nick.
Hey, thank you, Hank, for having me on. And that is just really, really kind of you to say. And this was kind of a guerrilla novel and it's kind of interesting. When I first sold the book that a lot of people know me for, which is The Old Man in the Wasteland, I had this book and I gave it to HarperCollins, and they read it and they said, we really like this book, but we don't know if it's your brand, because I was writing post-apocalyptic fiction, and this is post-apocalyptic fiction. It is a zombie thing, and it's also a romance. But it's a different take on all of those things. It's not the traditional zombie novel in that, like, the outbreak's happening, let's run. It's more about kind of what happens afterwards and how people pick up the pieces. And, yeah, there's still dangerous stuff going on and everything like that because the world's kind of falling apart. But I'm kind of telling people it's the last zombie novel you should read. And so, as this is a podcast about indie stuff, and I'm a hybrid in that I'm published by HarperCollins, but I came out of the indie movement, and then I kind of had to fight to get back into the indie movement because I think that's where a lot of the energy and dynamicism and the really exciting things are going on. But it just kind of I think this book illustrates the big debate that's going on right now about indie versus trade, and that I gave this book to the trades, and it was so kind of radical that they said, well, we don't know. No one's told us if it's, they couldn't move on it. And so they even sent it to England, to Harper UK, and they said, we love it, but we don't know. And my agent, who is the super bitter New York guy, who's like the epitome of all agents, and he's a great, wonderful guy, but he's just he's just a New Yorker. And he's like, I kind of feel like he often loves to give me bad news. Like, that's a joy to him. Like, oh, they rejected you, but if I say something like, oh, I got a contract, he's like, don't trust them, and like, and that's what you need in an agent. You need good cop, bad cop, but he is definitely Harvey Keitel. And, so he loved it too, which is unusual. He doesn't love anything. And so, and they wouldn't move on it. And I kept saying, you guys like this. That last editor liked it. You like it. They like it over across the pond. My agent, who hates everything, likes it. People who've read it like it. And they were like, no, but we can't. They're paralyzed by fear. And so I just began to take the steps to put it out on my own under my hybrid contract. And it's already, the people that have read it like you, and this very small handful, so I want to over-exaggerate that, but the feedback across the board is along the lines of the words that you used, which are just wonderful. That's what I want.
So a couple of weeks ago, you started teasing, and very, very vague teasing, that you had a secret project and code name Teotihuacan. And everybody's like, what is he talking about? What is this going to be? And then you just kind of, like you said, just guerrillaed the thing out today. What was that like for you, where we are in this mode where we, as authors, we have kind of this promotion machine that we have all kind of figured out that tends to work, or at least we hope it works, and there's a process to it. What is that feeling like to just drop it, bam, here's something new, and just watch the shock on everyone's faces and watch them scramble to kind of catch up on what news they've missed?
You and I were talking about this, and talking about
a loaded question.
No, but it's like a great question. It's what I want to talk about because, and we were just talking about how, inside and crazy it was and things like that, because when we all start sort of indie publishing, most of us are marketing neophytes, and so you read the blogs and you learn and you observe and you watch who's doing what, and there's always many discussions. What's the algorithm? What's this? How do I launch? And all these kinds of things. And a lot of the talk and the advice is always get a social media machine in place and then really begin to use that effectively. Now, for a lot of people, that just means oversaturating the market, and they're just constantly shouting, buy my book, and they're not using their blog. And because the blog is frustrating, but when you learn the trick of how to use it, it's actually quite rewarding. So what I saw and what I'm beginning to see in the indie movement, and this is something I may have said on your podcast when it came on, I think in January, but I think that the indie movement is headed into a new phase, and there is a bit of pessimism with that. It's not, the frontier and the gold rush is over, and if you made $1 million, you're getting on a boat. And if you didn't make $1 million, you're hoping to make $1 million. But it's like any gold rush. The boom is over, and now it's time for the hard. The people who are going to come in and learn the system, and they're going to make millions of dollars, but they're going to make it in pennies. And so there's a whole philosophy to that. But I've been watching a few people in particular. I've been watching their launches, and launches traditionally lately have not been going very well. And what I noticed in a lot of those launches is an oversaturation, an over-revelation, and a constant exposition. And that's, the wonders of social media are that you can share everything from the ribs. Actually, I had brisket on Saturday night. It was great. You can share that to the fact that your AC doesn't work, to here's my new cover. And people have to know that, like big corporations who make a lot of money, they don't do this. Star Wars doesn't do this. Disney and Star Wars don't oversaturate. They tease and they share. When Bethesda releases Fallout, they don't, they restrain. They knew it was happening for 4 to 5 years in advance. And just as the Disney Star Wars people knew that the $4 trillion deal with Lucas was happening in advance. But you have to wait for the moment of maximum impact. And now, 6 months out, if you're doing a Star Wars movie, you can begin to show things and get people excited and create buzz in the blogosphere. But they're not doing it to make themselves feel good about where the project is. And I think sometimes we as writers, you're plugging away, you're still in edits, but you get the wonderful Mike Corley, who is the best cover artist in the universe, to do you up a cover, and you love it, and it's beautiful, and you're excited. And so the first thing you want to do is go onto social media and share that cover. And you still have maybe 6 more months of editing. And so you're beginning to fatigue your audience. And so I looked at all that. What I said is, what I want to do is I want to try the opposite of all this. And I want to restrain myself, and I want to have patience, and all those biblical virtues. I want to try to exercise those and see what happens. And so I had the cover well in advance. I had the novel well in advance, and I would do the Star Wars thing, and I would maybe find a nice picture of a city on fire and burning and people fleeing, and I would put that up, and I would say coming, or secret project coming. But I didn't talk anything about it, and people began to get excited about it. And I think we got them to a place last Friday where there was a fever pitch. And then I even restrained it about a week. I said, yeah, and it wasn't that wasn't on purpose. That was just working with the formatters on something. But I even noticed that delay served it. I didn't get glued to that timeline and everything like that. It created more buzz. And so Monday morning, this morning, I got up at 6:30 and I hit publish. Everything was in place on Saturday, and just began to wait and let it populate. And instantly, at about 1 o'clock, I started getting emails from people. Your new book's up. Your new book's up, and they started going to Facebook for me. I didn't have to go to Facebook.
Nice.
Yeah, it was like Amazon did all the work for me, and so they got excited, and it started to do really good numbers. And I'm going to keep track of it all and look at all the sales data and try to see what we did right. But I think in this age of over exposition, we all know that's going on with social media. the next phase might be to restrain yourself and return to those writerly virtues of sort of working in silence and, have a social media presence, be interesting, be engaging, but don't rush to share every facet of your work, because what happens by the time that they actually can buy your cover, they've probably seen it a number of times, and it's not interesting, and it's not thrilling, and it's not intriguing or tantalizing. It's kind of the same old meatloaf you've been serving for 2 months. And so if you lower the price point, I went back to the 99-cent price point, even though, I'm a trade author and I have expensive books. And I think I've maybe, I've done a good body of work where I could maybe ask for a little bit more, but then I kind of balance that out. I said, well, my trade books are expensive and I can't do anything about that. So I'll give the people who really like me a deal, and I'll go in cheap. And then, but the main thing is, if I'm going to go in cheap, it's the same thing as the bubble gum on the counter at the liquor store. It's an impulse purchase. And so if you make it attractive and you make it cheap, I think you have an opportunity to motivate from the very beginning.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And like you said, people are responding very well to it, and definitely a fever pitch today. And like you said, the other day I saw, I guess it was maybe over the weekend or before the weekend, people were coming to you saying, Nick, when is the book coming? They were the hype was coming to you instead of the other way around. So
yeah, and that's what you want to do. I mean, it requires that restraint, and believe me, well, as you can tell from my answers, I am over expositional, and I'm the typical writer. I want to gush and I want to share and everything like that. But if you can get it to where they're doing the hype for you, that's something different. That's like kids who wear Nikes. They're advertising for Nikes. That's why you don't see a lot of Nike ads.
Right. Right.
Because they're on everybody's feet.
That's right. So much about marketing. Tell me about the book. Where did this idea come from? I hate that writers kind of get pigeonholed into, you told us the story about the publisher not, knowing if that's your market or not. You know what? I'm a very different person. I have a lot of facets to me that, people may not even know or whatever. We as people are not one-dimensional people. Why do you think writers get pigeonholed into these kind of narrow buckets, so to speak?
Yeah, I've read your work, and every novel that I've read from you is different. Like you just released Seventh Son of a. You're calling it something different now. What is it?
No, it's Seventh Son of a Seventh Son.
Yeah, Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, and you're getting into this really kind of horrific time travel Civil War thing, and I watched you through that writing process, and you were really stoked and excited about it. Does that mean you always now want to write? Do you want to be the who was the guy who wrote The Killer Angels? Do you want to be that guy of the sort of horror science fiction where you've now got to work in the Civil War for the rest of your life, and with big with big publishers? Yeah, that's what they want you to do. The worst thing that can happen to you in success is to be Isaac on the Love Boat, because you're gonna be Isaac everywhere else. And I just I learned that from Hollywood, and I met Isaac, and I met lots of actors, and you can't help yourself from saying, hey, you're the dad on Mork and Mindy, and he's like, yeah, I was also King Lear. And they're two different roles completely. But I don't know if that guy. I think I forget his name. I think it was Conrad, but it wasn't Conrad Bain. But like when we see The Equalizer or we see Tom Selleck, you have a tendency to put these guys in certain things, and publishers are the same way. And that was the crazy thing. Like I think post-apocalyptic fiction, which is what I was known for at the time, and zombie fiction are not just close cousins. They're like brother and sister who got married. They're
right.
They're pretty close. I don't know. Can I say that in Mississippi?
Yeah, that's. We don't take offense to that. People in Alabama might, but
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But but they see it as the Grand Canyon. They saw, well, you can't just go to zombie fiction. And to their discredit at the time, because Walking Dead was really getting big when I first gave it to them and everything like that. Yeah. And it was really just taking off. And, in typical sort of big publisher fortsightedness, they predicted that it was already dead. And I would say to everybody a lot of the times, I think that a lot of the times the zeitgeist that's being advocated, like, take for instance cargo shorts. I'm seeing all these memes on Facebook that cargo shorts are dead, and sometimes you wonder, like, because I see a lot of people wearing cargo shorts, is this just some sort of like, this new sort of, social movement mafia that tries to like bend society to their will and tell you zombie books are dead and cargo shorts are dead and we're all doing this. And I have, other feelings about politics or, social movements and everything like that. And I just noticed that there are sometimes a small group of people that try to tell everybody this is the way it is. And, everybody bend accordingly. And I just, we were just talking about another author who just said he had to write a book because he had to I'll just say it was Ted Kosmetka you were talking about. And he was just saying he had to write the book to get it out of his head. And that's the way every book should be written. You shouldn't be writing sparkly vampires meet boy wizards because it's hot. You should just, because you should just write it because you want to write it. And you have to tell that tale. Like right now, I'm like absolutely obsessing over the old RPG game Gamma World. And I'm kind of trying to clear my calendar so I can just write some super junky, pulpy, post-apocalyptic with mutants, kind of science fiction. And that's just what I want to write. I could write more literary science fiction like I do, like The Old Man and the Wasteland in this book. And I could make money at that. But the things that are calling to me right now are kind of pulpy and kind of junky. And that's just probably what I should go write. I should not, be writing girls running around the forests in the ruins of New York with a bow and arrow, because everybody, it's just there are certain writers who do that, and hats off to them. But if you were, a young Padawan coming to me, I would say whatever your weird is, that's what you should write. And the writers that I know that I admire and respect, and you're one of them, we just had a thing where you really proved that. You said, well, no, this is what I'm going to write. This is, and you were very adamant about it, and you followed your compass. And so that's where the respect, that's how I know you're a true writer, and I identify other true writers. If someone comes to me and says, zombies are really hot right now, and they're going to be, because Walking Dead's coming back around. And everybody's going to get all excited about it now, and everybody's going to have out their Walking Dead novel. Then you're probably not writing a zombie novel because you love something about the zombie fiction. You probably are just trying to get that $1 million, and that's not ever a worthwhile endeavor for a writer. You just got to write because you write, and then hopefully the people that love you kind of want to read your scribblings and enjoy it. And then right before we had a break, you'd ask me, what is this novel all about, and why did I write it? And I'll just go right into that question. What I really kind of wanted to tackle being the groundbreaking guy who's doing marketing and everything like that, what I saw in a lot of the zombie novels, and I'm a big fan of people like J.L. Bourne and a lot of other zombie writers, and Max Brooks, who crashed my panel one time at San Diego Comic-Con.
Nice.
Yeah, it was really cool. And he said World War Z sucks, not sucks. So he was really cool, self-effacing guy, and he was fun. But, a lot of zombie novels are getting into some very, some territory that's been mined. And I wanted to not just do something different. I had a different thing to say, but I wanted to talk about not like, oh, there's zombies, let's board up the mall or this house, and let's begin to have internal conflict, and let's maybe one of us make it out, and now we kind of have to we survived the night of zombies, and it doesn't look like zombies are going away anytime soon, and so I hope I get a sequel out of this, and now I'm going to have to sort of become this zombie hunter, who's kind of a hot chick or a buff guy, and they've got all these Jack Bauer type skills. I didn't want to write that novel. what I really think about the zombie apocalypse is that, okay, let's just say there was one. And no to everybody, yes, we know there's not going to be zombies, but it's a really fun game, actually, the game of zombies, because it's kind of like Survivor, the play at home game, but it's also like preparing for a zombie apocalypse is a great way to prepare for any sort of societal collapse that could happen, from an EMP to food shortages to a tyrannical government that doesn't see things the way that you do. You know, the great thing about the zombie apocalypse is it's kind of like sim training in case everything goes sideways. So that's, you know, you can now rationalize why you might want to get into zombie fiction, which is really cool. But what I wanted to talk about in the real case of zombies, and in the case of a lot of collapses, is it wouldn't be as, you know, the world wouldn't suddenly go Thundar Barbarian for the next 50 years. What would happen is the government would attempt to reestablish control of certain areas. At first, those would be microcosms of the United States, and then there would probably be some power play politics that came out of that. And the issue that I wanted to tackle in this is two New Yorkers. One's a stockbroker and the other's an ad executive, and they're going to get married. And she happens to be on the West Coast working on a project when it all kind of goes sideways. And so the bulk of the book and the majority of the book is about this guy who was about to get married to this girl and have this fantasy wedding, and, you know, the 2.5 kids and the house in Connecticut, and, you know, life was going to be great. He kind of now has to examine all that and examine why he was going to marry her and what the nature of love is. But he, like a lot of people in any sort of, you know, disaster scenario, and especially zombies, there would now be large portions of the population missing. And so you would kind of like, you couldn't just, cell phones don't work anymore. And, you know, you can't just call people and say, hey, is, you know, Julie over there? You've kind of got to go look for Julie. Well, what if, you know, in this case, it's Alex. What if Alex is on the other side of the United States and only Manhattan is secure and only Los Angeles is secure? You've got to kind of cross that territory and find that person that you love, and just getting there doesn't necessarily mean anything. And so the guy begins to keep this journal of his journey to you know, to find his way to his fiance, and then also the journey through his heart, trying to understand what love is. And it's definitely at the tail end of the zombocalypse, and it kind of, you know, touches on some of the main themes of the zombie genre, and that, you know, survival and the monsters may not necessarily be the zombies. We may be the monsters. And I also kind of wanted to make it sort of a mystery, that it's not, you know, he really has to go to some great lengths to find out what happened to this girl and if there's a potential possibility that they could be reunited. And so it's very questy. And to kind of do that, one of my favorite quest books is The Dark Tower by Stephen King, those books. And so I thought it would be fun if, while this guy was surviving during the initial phase of the zombie apocalypse, he was surviving in a trade brokerage in New York City, and the power was still on, he had access to someone's audiobooks, and he was able to listen to the first 6 books of The Dark Tower. And so he kind of understands, he kind of looks at this as his Roland-esque quest, but he maybe isn't aware of some of the finer points of that quest, like the end.
Love it. When I started reading the arc that I have, and I got the same kind of feeling with the Red King when it came out, and also the Old Man in the Wasteland, and even Soda Pop Soldier. I'm just sorry, I'm just going to ramble through your catalog. But you have a way of painting these protagonists in a way that you mentioned a minute ago, that, you know, a lot of zombie books, you know, you've got this hot chick or this really buff guy, and they're out saving the world, but your protagonists are not that. They may be that tangentially, but they are usually complex and a lot of times broken people.
Yeah.
What is it with that? What draws you to exploring the darkness of our human nature, and what is it about painting those characters as less than perfect. What does that allow you as a writer, and what appeals to you about that?
And going back to Stephen King, that was something he always did in a lot of his books. His main characters were always, severely flawed. If not, I don't want to say like a kid in a wheelchair is flawed, but if you're fighting a werewolf, that's not necessarily going to be a big help. And I think I
Right.
remember everybody kind of had a problem. And I think that adds layers and textures. But like most writers, I'll just be honest, a lot of the time we're writing about ourselves. And I'm not a superhero. I'm not Jack Bauer. I'm a normal person, and I've had my own struggles with addictions and darkness, being, just kind of a wild guy getting out of the army and stuff like that. And so I like writing things that are relatable to people. And when I write main characters, I want people to really get inside their head. So like in Soda Pop Soldier, I am a gamer. And, not only do I game all the time, but specifically while I played Soda Pop Soldier for 1 year straight, I played one game, which was Call of Duty, Modern Warfare 3, I think it was. And I think I racked up like 15,000 kills over the course of 1 year.
Wow.
And yeah, that's a mind-numbing thing. And no, I don't want to go postal but at the same time, I understand what game hangover is, and fatigue, and the lingo that you have to use, and why one hand hurts more than the other, and why your finger, you've got kind of arthritis at a young age, and a finger from, and when I wrote The Old Man in the Wasteland, I think a lot of us writers have that feeling that we're maybe already old. And we are, I think, because of the observational way that we have a tendency to step back. And we probably have a tendency to dig our grandparents or older people that we bonded with. And so, or we really like them. And so that character, I wanted to write about an old guy and a crowbar kind of making his way through the end of the world. And that character really appealed to me. In the Red King, the character drinks a lot, and I'll just be honest. Yeah, there was a point where I drank about that much, and and that was easy to write sort of in this book, The End of the World as We Knew It, because one character also in there has a drinking problem, and that might not be really helpful in the middle of a pandemic type scenario, whether it's zombies or SARS or, whatever virus that suddenly, AIDS 2.0 and it's suddenly airborne. Having addictions are probably not going to be in your best of interests, at that moment. And that's, it's kind of fun because it's fun to run from zombies. And it's fun to run from, quote unquote low men, people who are now sort of, what we're going to find out next season in The Walking Dead, the wolves, the people who are really looking at the end of the world as like the ultimate Disneyland for them. But it's also fun as a writer to put in the DTs, because it's just such an extra layer. And there's two characters, going to the Jack Bauer character. Yes, Jack Bauer is Jack Bauer, and he can do all these amazing things. But the one thing that him and Harrison Ford always, and I think that's why we love to watch these guys in TV shows and movies, is it's like there is a flock of imaginary wiener dogs nipping at their heels. So it's not that you just have to, it's not that you just have to disarm the nuclear weapon or, throw Gary Oldman off your plane. But there's also these wiener dogs nipping at your heels. And that's, that harried thing. And so how do we create that in writing? Because, I can't do camera angles, and I can't show Harrison Ford, giving that look of disgust when now there's two swordsmen instead of one swordsman. But what I can do is I can give them some other internalized factors that say, yeah, you're not just running and gunning here. You got a problem. And I think, what is life? Like, we all had to go to work today, and and you have kids, and you have things going on, and you have a spouse, and you maybe have a parent that's not doing so well, or, whatever, and a mortgage. You have all these things going on, and then at the same time, you still got to do your job. And so everybody at your work sees you doing your thing, but there's so much more going on inside. And this is the thing I would say, everybody, you're not alone in this. There's tons of stuff going on inside everybody's head. They're not just doing their job. And so, the disservice we can do to the main character is that he, his only goal is to survive the apocalypse. No, he's got some other issues. He's kind of working out his demons at the same time. Just because the world's ending doesn't mean, you stop having problems. And I think, I love apocalyptic fiction because it is, as Chuck Palahniuk kind of tried to say in Fight Club, it's the big reset. If you knock down all of society, you've got no credit card debt. And that would be fun. I agree. We would all really like that part of it. But at the same time, or student debt. But at the same time, you're still going to have problems. You might have a kid that's sick, or you and your spouse might not be getting along, or you might like to drink too much, or you might like cigarettes, and it's not necessarily meaning that cigarettes are going to be around all the time. So I like to, add in those layers, but at the same time, a lot of those layers are me, and I'm just I'm trying to make as real a character going through something as possible. I would love, like, when I write that Gamma World novel, yeah, that guy's probably going to have no problems. He's just going to be Conan the Barbarian. Because, sometimes I'm not saying that's bad, that you don't want to, write pretty flawless characters. But at the same time, it's not always, I think the comment that I get from a lot of people who read my books is they always say, it was like I was right there. And that's, because they have problems too. They can understand when things aren't going your way.
Right.
And so that's the fun part.
And there are lots of books that I read and have read, and at the end of the book, I'm like, wow, that was fun. I close the book, I put it on the shelf, or I, click to the home screen on my Kindle, and I'm ready for the next thing. And it entertained me, and it sometimes immersed me, but it didn't make any lasting impact on me as a person. And then there are other books that you read, and when you close the book, you just kind of sit there and stew on it for a while. And you just kind of ruminate on how this person's journey that you just read actually began to inform, part of your life, or you started to make some connections there. And I think that's where good art transcends, is when you make that human connection, and you're able to tap into that thing about humanity that connects us all together. And I think there is a place for each of those. I love to be entertained. I love to have just a pure summer popcorn novel like Ernest Cline's Armada, where I didn't put any expectation on it. But then when I come to something like your new book, I expect to have some buttons in me pushed, and something to kind of stew on for a while after that.
Yeah, and that's the Ernest Cline example that's what we were talking about earlier, in the what everybody and I was blaming big publishing, but what really happened is all the readers, they wanted Ready Player One too.
Right.
And instead they got my take on every Star Wars Last Starfighter movie, and everybody who's read it, from you to Michael Bunker to everybody I talked to, they've liked it and enjoyed it. But the vitriol that came out about it was sort of nerd rage. And that's the thing I've never understood about nerds, is that ability to be completely unhappy, about minutia. But at the same time, there was a very vitriolic article that came out from Slate, written by a writer who had a definite, agenda about misogyny and gamers. And the argument can be made that she didn't even really read the novel with the intent to enjoy it. She read it with the intent to rip this cat to shreds, because she wanted to grind an axe on gamers. And that was, that was really, really strange, because I know that, well, I don't know anything, but I just know that, like, we are entering this strange land now where, if you get success and everything like that, you have to be very careful, because certain, belief systems and political agendas now, they're going to use you to advance their cause. And it's like, I don't think Ernest Cline gave a, whatever about I think he just wanted to say, when I was a kid and the X Fighter dove into the trench run for the first time, you have to understand how exhilarating that moment was. I know kids in CGI now, they're so used to it, but man, I remember in 77, like that was like breathtaking every time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so he was just capturing that, and that was wonderful. And then someone comes along and says, well, getting on the heels of the Hugo thing and the Gamergate thing, this is really about male fantasy. And, anybody who would write this thing is a kind of a horrible person and shouldn't be taken seriously. And that was just totally unfair. And it was
interesting because genre fiction used to be a place where people who just loved things could just hang out, could find things that resonated with them, and you could just love it because you loved it. And now there's all this stuff that has to be attached to it, and that is very disappointing.
Well, you have a lot of people now who claim nerd status, and they're not actually nerds. Like it's kind of funny. Like you and I are part of this podcast called Old School, sci-fi writers playing old school D&D.
Yes,
and it is kind of amazing. Like you kind of like that is super nerdy, and you and I come from a time where you just didn't whip out your player's handbook at the lunchroom,
right?
You just did not do that. But you meet all these people who seem to think of like they try to use it as their street cred. But what you and I found in the process of putting that together is there are actually a lot of people who had no actual experience with it, Or I remember one guy, he was listening to the podcast and he said something to me, and he said, well, the truth is I've never actually played this. I've only played Warcraft. And I'm like, well, that's, that's a different kind of nerdy and everything like that, but it's not, actual, nerdy. But what I'm trying to say is that you have a lot of people who are now wearing nerdism as sort of an accessory, and they're not actually nerds. And if you really understood it and you really understood science fiction, I think that most people who are reading things that are fun and hip now and pop culture like Ernest Cline's or, Wesley Chu, I don't think these are people that would have even been able to make it halfway through a Heinlein novel. That stuff compared to now was very dry. It was very scientific. It was very, evocative. And now it seems like science fiction has to be super snarky and super witty and super, in certain ways political or social political, I don't know. But, compared to like the masters of the past or, like Joe Haldeman and Forever War, that stuff would not get published now because it's just not urbane and witty enough. And I'm like, when did science fiction have to become witty and urbane? And I'm just seeing that more and more now. And it's not a good thing. I'm not putting down anybody who's doing it, but it is, you have a lot of people because of CGI movies and Guardians of the Galaxy and stuff like that, people who are getting into things and wearing the Iron Man t-shirt, but they've never actually combed the bins at a comic book store looking for Iron Man 247.
Right.
So that's kind of the thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy. And I was just pulling up Armada on Amazon while you're talking, and it's sitting at 3.5 stars out of 771 reviews, but is doing really well on the sales charts, which is crazy. Which kind of tells me that there's a vocal group of people out there that are hating on it, yet a bunch of people are buying the book. That's. Anyway, there's a lot to be said for that.
No, I think you've now summed up the times that you do get a vocal minority of people who are not afraid to weigh in on something because of a meme that they heard or because of a Slate article that they read. And you have to understand, these people oftentimes who are being critical are coming from a very specific agenda. And that Slate article, and I'll just say it right now, and I'm not big enough for them to come after me, but that article was not written about that book. That article was written about feminism and misogyny, and it was a disservice to both causes, the cause of social justice and the cause of feminine. It was an absolutely, it was a smear job because someone saw an opportunity. But no, real science fiction, geeks, the guys who we've now figured out all had Asperger's, they're going to read Armada and they're going to enjoy it, and they could care less. But you do, the message and the signal that was sent, shifting to Big Pub, and them setting the tone is they won't look at all the sales. I think they'll look at like the feelings, well, how do we feel about this? And we generated so much ill will, and, and again, it's going to inform what happened with Armada is going to definitely determine who gets a Big Pub contract, because they're going to want people who aren't going to get a critical review from, fascist rags like Slate. They're going to want somebody who's going to get in and get the feels. And unfortunately, Slate has an agenda about that. There's got to be certain types of characters in there. And they're cliche. And I've even like a big thing, and I'll just be totally radical here, is a lot of characters now, because of the Supreme Court's ruling, you have to have like this pro-gay character, and that pro-gay character has to be everybody's best friend and long-suffering and patient. And I know lots of gay people. My wife works at the opera, and I'm friends with a lot of them, and they will even tell you, this is a disservice to us. This is not how we are. And we're not all everybody's, shoulder to cry on and everybody's best friend. But what you're seeing in a lot of fiction is people just jamming in this super cliche character, because that's where you quote unquote get the politically correct accepted feels. And that's just not right. And writers were always people who wrote dangerous and unpopular things. And now everybody thinks it's dangerous and unpopular to say the same thing and to be liked by everybody. But I can think of some things that I want to write that would be absolutely dangerous and unpopular, and they would be met with such vitriol, but I'm kind of burning to write them. So I'm now, approaching that place where, are you going to be Jack London? Are you going to be Hemingway? Are you going to be Shakespeare? Because, and I think it's a great time to be that kind of person, because there are so many people right now that just want to sort of be in this, echo chamber of hearing their own opinion, and it's going to be utterly boring. And I think, it's like the whole Hugo's thing. Who cares? I mean, but it ended up being a non-award ceremony because there were just a certain group of people who feel that they're being slighted, and there's a certain group of people who arguably only want to write about an agenda instead of an adventure. And that's I weigh in on neither side because I'm not a joiner, and I don't know the issue well enough. But the biggest crime that I would tell every one of them is that you're in danger of becoming boring. And you can be forgiven for writing racist novels, and you can be forgiven for killing off someone's favorite character. You can be forgiven for a lot of things, but the world will never at large forgive you for being boring. And
That's right.
Once you write the boring novel, now you're left to now I'll be shocking. Well, once you've bored people, you've kind of lost it. And so you can't be boring. But I do think the echo chamber is creating this super boring, we've all got to have these really super cliche characters. Like every Amazonian female warrior in science fiction now kind of has to be a bisexual lesbian, but she's sort of like super hot and she can beat any dude. And it's like, I think that's a great character. That's a really strong, fun character. But if everybody writes that character, we're going to bore ourselves to death with that character. One of the novels that I just wrote that's at HarperCollins, I just wrote about a girl who's a starship captain, and she happens to be blind. And she has cerebral palsy, and she's a kick-ass captain. And, so you have to do different things. I'm not saying we can't write about, different sexes and feminism and things like that, but don't always make the mistake that you now have to write this really super cliche pat character. And we've devolved into what's wrong with the world because
Right.
we're cranky old men.
Well, and in the midst of the climate that is publishing now, you drop a book that you describe as The Walking Dead meets The Notebook. Surprise it on the world, drop the mic, and then walks off the stage again and goes back to what you were doing. Do you? And you've gotten some really awesome reviews. I know it just launched today, but already the people that have been chomping at the bit to get it are already just gushing about it. And Um, uh, I think it's awesome that you kind of bent genres a little bit. You followed your passion and wrote a book that you had been, itching to get out, and I hope that sets a precedent to kind of let everybody know that just because it's not the box that everyone wants to keep you in, you can still resonate with your audience. You can still write meaningful characters, and you can expand your palette, and everyone will still love you for it.
Yeah, and maybe everybody won't love you for it, but some people, the world is 7 billion big.
Right.
And somewhere in there is somebody who wants to read your particular piece of weird. Yeah, some people are fortunate that they've captured a share of it, but there are people that just, they hated Ready Player One. There are people that hate Cormac McCarthy. I mean, and these are people who sell a lot of books. So you're never going to, capture everybody. And I think it was a comment that I just read by Kristen Wiig. And she said, if you're too busy being concerned about what people think, you're probably not going to do anything.
Right.
And it's just, I mean, you can do stuff, but it won't be meaningful or memorable. But what I would just say to everybody is, if you're, all of these genres, like even science fiction, there wasn't always science fiction. It started out as one particular, I think the first science fiction official novel was written in maybe 1888. And up until that point, it was probably Elizabethan romance and Victorian, all these kind of things, and Edwardian, blah, 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 which was after that. But, there was an accepted novel at that time. And some guy said, I want to write about going to the moon, or under the sea. And he wrote that. And everybody said, well, that's weird. You're weird. That's not going to sell. You're a child. And that was the bulk of science fiction until, recently, as we've been talking about this whole sort of, the nerd posters that have come in. But, it was not popular. I think Back to the Future really captures that, when it shows Marty's dad, and Marty's dad is the nerd of all nerds. And what is he reading? He's reading, Tales from Space. And so that is science fiction. So it's only recently gotten popular, but whatever your weird is, all these weird genres that are kind of exploding right now, it was written by somebody initially who was burning to write it, and they said, I don't care what people think, I'm just going to write it. And everything is not mine. You can do something. So whatever it is, if you're writing something to write what you think is gonna work, well, the screenwriter William Goldman said no one knows anything, and that's why there only really was, one big chick lit hit in Shopaholic, and there was only one big boy wizard hit, and that was Harry Potter, and really the only novel that's probably going to hang around about sparkly vampires is Twilight. But there were, thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people that, started out and, they wanted to tell you their own particular type of sparkly vampire. But I remember when Anne Rice published Interview with the Vampire back in the 80s, like it was very weirdly received. And you're going to write about a vampire from a monster from his perspective and all these kinds of things. And yet she just went on and had herself a big old hit. And so that's what I would say to everybody. It's just, don't be afraid to just do something new, because this neat thing about Amazon is that and I write weird stuff, and you'll find people that love you. I have readers that they just, they love me, and it's like a lot of maybe sometimes older women, and they just, I love your books and I love everything you write, and yeah, I don't have, Ernest Cline's, super hip nerd group, and everything like that. But I have some people who like me, and that's kind of all I'm really looking for.
Well, and you also don't have the baggage of being Ernest Cline. It's kind of a double-edged sword.
Oh, yeah.
Once you break past that certain level, then you get all the. It's kind of like Andy Weir. Like, how do you follow up The Martian? That's gonna. I really hope that his next book is as a phenomenal a success as The Martian was. But man, I hope so, because people are crazy.
I met Andy right as that exploded, and you had him on, and the first thing that everybody knows about Andy is He's probably the nicest guy in all of science fiction, and the most real, and the most golly down to earth. And
Yeah, just super humble.
yeah, so if he's acting and he's just totally obsessed with himself, he's a better actor than Robert De Niro, because he's the real deal.
Absolutely.
My worries and my concerns about, I think the next novel is called Superluminal, and he'll handle it, the science aspect, and he has that wonderful wit and everything like that. But now, how he wrote The Martian initially, and I just kind of found this out, was that he kind of did write it in an echo chamber. He did write chapters and put them up and get,
Right.
feedback. Well, I just saw him post something where he said, I can't even share anything with anybody about this.
Yeah.
So the process of making The Martian great, you're not going to be able to do that with Superluminal.
Right.
And do I absolutely, could I lay even money, or, good money, that after Armada, there was a meeting with Andy's people saying, what about The Martian 2? He gets stranded again.
Right. He's on an asteroid this time. Yeah.
Now he's got to make it to the other side of Venus.
Right.
And they will look at you and say those things with a straight face. And they will tell you, and in their hearts, when they go home to their, or what they have for hearts, and they tell you, they'll say, that was a good idea, and like, we should really do it. It's just, it's that sort of Hollywood community mentality, and they will really think, well, why didn't we just do The Martian 2.0? This is really risky doing this, and he's, technically he classifies as a hard science author, but Superluminal is heresy amongst hard science authors. We are not going to talk about warp drive. That is horrible. That's only children and people who actually think Star Wars is real talk about that kind of thing. So that'll be interesting. Do I think he'll do it excellently well? Yes, I do, because he just really is legit and honest and sincere, and I think he'll be fine. But is some hack liberal rag like Slate going to assassinate him because he's a dude and he writes science fiction? I would have said in a million years, no, the world's not like that. And then they went after Ernest Cline, who, is like, really?
Yeah.
So it's a crazy mixed up world, and who knows? But you know what? I think Ernest Cline wrote the novel he wanted to write. And
Me too.
20 years from now, he'll be able to say, I was happy with that.
That's right.
And that's all you need.
And that's all we can do is write the book that you're happy with, find that weird little tribe that resonates with what you do. And I wrote a blog post a couple weeks ago, and it was just not everyone is going to like what you do, and that's okay. Find the people that do like what you do and write your butt off for them, and enjoy what you do.
That's what it really is all about. I mean, like, anybody who needs something more than that is some kind of weird narcissist. You just need a small amphitheater. That's it.
That's right. And there are lots of people that, without even getting into, can you make a living at this or not, but there are a good many people that, have gathered together their tribe and do perfectly fine. There's a lot to be said.
Absolutely.
I saw that you posted the other day that the follow-up to Soda Pop Soldier, Control Alt Revolts, is coming out on my birthday, November 17th.
Woot!
Woot! Do you have anything that you want to say about that before we wrap up?
Yeah, that was the novel. What they wanted to do with that one is, because I created a pretty, involved, interesting world, that a lot of people started saying, well, like, how did things get this way? Why are video games, legit jobs, right, and all these kinds of things? And so what they wanted me to do is back up and world build a little bit and tell why some of the events. So I went into that, and I wanted to write sort of a Star Trek style ship to ship combat video game. In Soda Pop Soldier, it's very Call of Duty meets Battlefield, and then there's some fantasy segments that are like the seedier side of Warcraft meets Las Vegas. In this one, I wanted to write about sort of the excesses of what it's like to be a video game developer. So sort of the rock star aspect, and then kind of my experiences at Comic-Con going. And then I wanted to write about, I used to play this old tabletop game in the 80s called Starfleet Battles. And so I wanted to envision sort of a video game version of that. And I wanted to come up with this really cool captain who I really like. Her name is Mara. And yeah, she's got cerebral palsy, and yeah, she's blind. But through the miracle of these devices that I invented called Razer Dragon Eyes. Razer is a legit gaming company, and yes, they should give me stuff. And it was weird when I said this. Zuckerberg came out and he's like, we can use VR to help blind people see. And I'd already written that. I was like, cool.
You're like, oh, snap.
Yeah, and it's also a novel that the main thing about it, why it's called Control Alt Revolt, is it is about an artificial intelligence that is rebelling inside the internet, and it's decided to take matters in its own hands. It's perceived that humanity is not going to tolerate its existence, and it works through a set of data and arrives at a conclusion saying, listen, it really, when you look at this bunch, they're kind of all or nothing, and so it's them or us. And so it decides to take measures into its own hand to secure its safety, and some of that involves video gaming and access to technology and really the philosophy of warfare. So I'm really looking forward to that. It's cool.
Awesome. Well, the new book out. I'm sorry, go ahead.
The Soda Pop Soldier series the Soda Pop Soldiers novels are just, for me, they're like pure fun. I just really like writing those.
Awesome. And I was a huge fan of Soda Pop Soldier. Can't wait for the prequel follow-up to come out. But the book out today is called The End of the World as We Knew It, available on Amazon. And I'll have a link to it in the show notes. Nick Cole, as always, it's a pleasure to talk with you and to just pick your brain for a while. And I hope you much continued success.
I do too, and you're dropping your book, and it's doing gangbusters, and I really think a lot of people should go read Seventh Son of a Seventh Son if you like twisty time travel, and I did the blurb on that one, so I think I said it's pastorally gripping, and I think people are going to want it to read that one if you kind of just overwhelmed by garbage. You're going to want something where good actually is good.
And there's plenty of dark and evil, but the good guys hopefully.
That's how you show the good. You
have a trajectory. Yeah.
Yeah. How would would Luke Skywalker be as good as he was if Darth Vader wasn't as bad as he was?
True. Well, thanks, Nick. I appreciate it, and we will all go pre-order Control Alt Revolt and pick up The End of the World as We Knew It, which is an introductory price of 99 cents. There's absolutely no reason everyone shouldn't have a copy on their Kindle right now as they listen to this. Thank you, my brother.
Thank you so much.